I'm the youngest of three. That used to mean something. When I was little, it meant extra cookies, bedtime stories, and hiding behind my brother when the neighbor's dog got loose. But somewhere along the way, it became a role I never asked for: giver, helper, the quiet one, the one who never expected anything back. Last year, I spent every bonus check, every skipped dinner out, every small freelance project hustled at night, saving for something I thought would matter. A cruise for my parents' 40th anniversary. It wasn't fancy, just meaningful. 7 days, Gulf breeze, their first real vacation in years, paid in full, $19,000. I still live in a one-bedroom rental, drive a 12-year-old sedan with a cracked dashboard. My parents? They've got a paid-off home I helped refinance. I never resented it. Family is family. You show up, even when it's inconvenient. At least, that's what I believed. Lately, my mother's calls had shifted. Polite, but cold. No talk of details, just we're figuring it out, and you don't need to worry. I chalked it up to stress. Planning trips wasn't her thing. I told myself, it's their big day, it's not about me. Then Forrest, my brother, sent a group text. The itinerary, excursions, flight confirmations, passenger list. Everyone was tagged, except me. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Hey, what about me? I replied. Silence. 30 minutes later, my sister-in-law finally responded. It's really just for the core group. I stared at my phone. Core group. I called my mom. She answered on the third ring. It's just easier this way, she said flatly. Less to coordinate. I was so stunned I laughed, quietly, the kind of laugh you make when you feel your own heart cracking a little. After everything, I'm not even considered core? No apology, just the soft hum of her TV in the background. Then she hung up. I opened the email. The cruise package confirmation. Still unopened, still addressed to me. I should have let it go, but I didn't. The morning of departure, I showed up at the port, dressed simple, jeans, windbreaker, hair tied back. I held the paperwork tight in my hand like armor. They were already checking in. Laughter, cameras, matching t-shirts. Forrest saw me first. His face dropped. What the hell are you doing here? I paid for this, he hissed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I have every right. Security looked confused. Ma'am, can we help you? My voice didn't shake. Yes, I'm the financial sponsor of this cruise. My name is Tinsley Carter. Here's the confirmation. They stared at the document, then at me. More murmurs. Then someone radioed the captain. A few minutes later, a man in a crisp uniform stepped out, calm, focused, looked me straight in the eye. Ma'am, he said, can I speak with you privately? We walked a few steps away from the noise, just out of earshot. He glanced down at the paperwork, then back up. The booking lists you as the financial sponsor, he said, not a guest. My lips parted. I paid for the cruise. Yes, ma'am. But the names for the manifest were submitted separately. Your family requested your name be excluded for logistical reasons. Logistical? Yes. I didn't scream, didn't demand to speak to whoever allowed that. I just stood there, face hot, fingers numb, $19,000, and not a single space for me. I turned away and walked back toward the sidewalk. Nobody followed. They boarded without a word. Later, in a tiny Airbnb just 2 blocks away, I sat on the edge of a creaky bed, shoes still on, backpack untouched. My phone buzzed. It was an automatic notification. Your Carnival booking has been activated. Bon voyage. I didn't cry, but I didn't sleep either. The wall paint was peeling, the mattress stiff, but the silence was louder than all of it. You don't belong here. Not even when you bought the ticket. That thought kept playing over and over. The next morning, I washed my face, tied my hair back again, and walked outside. They hadn't seen the last of me. Dignity is the last currency I have. I won't spend it on people who don't see me. That afternoon, while walking past the dock again, the captain's assistant, a woman maybe in her 40s, spotted me. She slowed, leaned close. You deserve better, you know, she said. I smiled faintly. I know. And I do. I stayed in the background after that. I booked another Airbnb, watched from a distance, never interfering. But something inside me had shifted. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They were wrong. The captain let me board through a back entry usually reserved for supply vendors. No announcement, no attention, just a nod, a short wave to the staff, and I was on. He didn't ask questions, only gave me a key card to a guest room tucked beneath the crew deck. No windows, thin walls, the kind of room nobody glamorous ever sees. From the upper deck, I watched them. My family, cheering, clinking glasses, soaking up the sunshine like nothing had happened. Like I didn't exist. They laughed easy, posed for photos, passed around shrimp cocktails as if guilt wasn't even a concept. And somehow, it all worked. They had orchestrated this whole thing without a single word to me. Weeks of planning, reservations, coordination, all done in the shadows. Without hesitation. Without shame. It wasn't the exclusion that stung the most. It was how easily they'd done it. Like this wasn't new. Like I'd been disappearing for years and just hadn't noticed. I remembered school concerts, birthdays, weddings, me volunteering to set up chairs, fetch coffee, make things easier. Always the helper, never the headline. Being invisible is something you get used to, until it turns into rage. Later that evening, I slipped into the back of the dining hall. I wore the kind of uniform that made people overlook you. Black slacks, white shirt, a borrowed server apron. No one noticed me. That was the point. Fallon, my sister-in-law, sat near the dessert table, leaning in close to my cousin Sherry. We didn't invite Tinsley because she's not the type of person we want representing the family, she whispered, loud enough that I could hear from a few steps away. Sherry laughed softly. Yeah, she's all into therapy and boundaries now. It's exhausting. Fallon didn't skip a beat. We didn't want her weird, independent energy ruining the vibe. It landed like a gut punch, not because they said it, but because they meant it. They weren't uncomfortable with my failures. They were threatened by my growth. I'd changed, and they hadn't. That was the problem. So it wasn't about the cruise. It never was. It was about what I no longer pretended to be, about how I stopped shrinking for their comfort. That made me the enemy. I moved along the room unnoticed. No one looked twice at a server. I found my father laughing with Forrest. My mother raising a toast with Fallon. A slideshow rolled across a screen, family photos stitched together like a love letter. I waited to see my face. One photo. I was 12, holding a puppy that wasn't even ours. That was it. Then came the unveiling of the cruise plaque, a gold-trimmed board with the family name, the dates, and beneath it, with gratitude to Forrest Carter for making this dream possible. A man beside me whispered, "That's sweet. Their son must be doing well." I didn't correct him. I just raised the plastic flute of cheap wine I'd grabbed off a tray and took a sip. Bitterness pairs well with dry champagne. Later, alone in my room, I pulled out my phone. Quietly, I began to record. Not just pictures, audio, video, conversations in hallways, whispers behind napkins, the moments no one thought mattered, the slights that weren't loud but cut deep. I didn't have a plan yet, just instinct. Information was currency now. The captain passed me in the corridor the next morning, paused, and looked at me kindly. "You holding up?" I smiled, faint. Sometimes being uninvited is the best position to listen. He nodded. "That it is." By late evening, I found myself near the lounge, alone. The crowd had thinned out. Most had retired to their cabins or the hot tubs upstairs. I wandered into a side room used for staff breaks. There on the table was a card, handwritten. It was addressed to Forrest. "Thank you for everything," it read. "You've always been the strong one. We're lucky to have you. Mom, Dad." But it was the note scribbled underneath that did it, in my mother's familiar cursive. Glad Tinsley wasn't involved. She's too sensitive about everything. I didn't flinch. I took a photo. No shaking hands, no tight chest, no tears. Just silence. A silence I hadn't felt before. Not the kind that comes from pain, but from clarity. When people tell you who they are, believe them. And I did. I paced the upper deck alone under dim lights, the party's laughter drifting faintly below. A single song played, our song, and the world shifted. I closed my eyes and remembered Dad dancing with me when I was 9, our toes buried in sand, the salty wind in my hair. I remember the way he spun me around and whispered, "You're my girl." For a moment, I belonged. Those moments haunt me now. Flashbacks flicked, family vacations, beachside dinners, me with my arms wrapped around their waist, believing I was essential. They were never perfect, but they weren't always cruel either. That memory felt like salt poured into a wound, because if I was once in the light, why am I now cast in shadow? Morning came reluctantly. I wandered to the buffet line, my shirt still smelling of salt and regret. As staff moved past me, I overheard voices. Forrest, too loud. Her meltdown in Santa Barbara. Mom said that was the breaking point, he told Fallon. Fallon laughed, loud enough for me to hear. Yeah, her panic always ruins things. Mom said she made everyone uncomfortable. I stopped mid-step. My body froze. My heart pounded. Vulnerability weaponized as drama. My pain recast as selfishness. A cough, a wrong breath, enough reason to erase me. They punished me for being human. I whispered under my breath. They made me the villain in my own story. Bitterness settled over me. Guilt drained away. I realized this exclusion wasn't accidental. It was planned, weaponized, prepped in whispers and glances. Back in my room, I stared at myself in the mirror. The lines on my face hadn't broken me. Eyes tired, shoulders squared, but not broken. I grabbed a journal from a drawer, flipping to a page from years ago, the penmanship shaky. I questioned my place in their lives even then. I'd thought it was adolescent insecurity. But the words read like a prophecy. I'd once considered leaving, cutting ties. Guilt tethered me back, but now I felt differently. This cruise is not the breaking point. It might be the start of something new. At brunch, I sat opposite my mother, poured coffee, held her gaze. I don't know what I waited for. A change, a crack. She looked at me, her face unreadable. She murmured something. I offered a half smile, cool as ice. Then I placed a napkin before me, folded into the same delicate leaf shape I folded in Chapter 1. Her eyes flickered. She looked away as if nothing had happened. In the silence, I understood. They remember, even when they pretend not to. I didn't cry. I didn't confront. I let the pain settle. I told no one. They spoke about family means forgiveness. I muttered a different truth. Family also means remembering who caused the wound and refusing to pretend it didn't bleed. Under the thin light, I took pen and paper and began a list. What they think I forgot, what I know they fear I remember. Tonight, memory becomes my weapon. They asked me to help set things up, as if it were an olive branch. My mother said it lightly at breakfast, placing a folded napkin beside me like a peace treaty. But I knew what it really was. One more performance of civility. I agreed anyway, not out of obligation, but because it let me move freely through their carefully designed world. I carried trays, arranged silverware, laid out centerpieces with seashells and lilies. No one said thank you. No one met my eyes. I moved among them like hired help, invisible but observant. They were arranging chairs for the luncheon on the main deck when I noticed how effortlessly they slipped into their roles. Forrest, the golden son, Fallon, the polished hostess, my parents, the adored couple celebrating 40 years of endurance. I stood with a cloth in hand, unnoticed, watching them move like actors hitting marks on stage. This was their hierarchy, affection earned through compliance, belonging granted to those who played along. I used to be the one smoothing over conflicts, offering to clean up, to mediate, to forgive. It took me nearly 4 decades to see that it was never kindness. It was control. A thought settled quietly in me. A seat at the table isn't generosity if you're only ever allowed to pour drinks. By noon, guests began to filter in. Friends from church, golf acquaintances, distant relatives. The kind who'd known me since birth but now smiled through me like I was glass. I stood near the railing, unseen. until Fallon shattered the quiet. "Well," she said loudly, with a tilt of her champagne, "at least Tinsley's still consistent, still single, still searching." Laughter sparked around the table. Someone muttered, "She was always the odd one." I didn't flinch. I set down my fork deliberately and looked at them, each one willing to wound me for sport. My voice was calm when I spoke. "Keep poking the quiet dog," I said, "and you'll find out if it has teeth." Chairs shifted. Glassware stilled. Fallon blinked, her smile freezing. My father leaned in sharply. "Watch your tone," he warned, low and stern. I didn't break eye contact. "You've spent years mistaking endurance for weakness." A murmur rippled. I leaned back. "I'm not warning you again." Silence. Not a gasp, not a retort, just an ice-cold pause. They looked at me, not with shock, but with calculation. I had stepped out of my role, and they didn't know where to place me now. After lunch, I walked the upper deck alone. No one followed. No one asked if I was all right. That was the cost of truth in this family, isolation. I realized then that speaking up hurts worse than swallowing pain, but at least it's honest. I repeated something I once read in a waiting room. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. A woman I'd never met, a guest in her 60s, stopped beside me at the rail. She didn't look at me, just faced the sea. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the loudest ones are the guiltiest." I nodded once. It wasn't comfort, but it was acknowledgement. By evening, whispers had replaced laughter. My siblings moved in clusters, glancing over shoulders. My father kept his jaw tight. My mother clutched her wine like it anchored her. They were not afraid of what I'd said. They were afraid of what I might say next. Forrest approached me near the stairwell. "What did you mean by that at lunch?" I looked at him. "What do you think I meant?" He hesitated. I walked away. It struck me then. This was the first time I wasn't explaining myself to them. I didn't owe them softness. I didn't owe them translation. You wait your whole life for someone to see your pain. But when they finally do, they turn away faster than if you'd stayed silent. That night, I found out I'd been left off the guest list for the captain's dinner. It wasn't a mistake. It was official. Formal. They wanted me gone without having to say it. I sat beneath the stars, phone in hand, and messaged the concierge. Just one question, one confirmation. They didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. "If they think I'm going to break first," I whispered, "they really don't know me." I woke to a single voicemail. My father's voice, measured, heavy. "We need to talk before breakfast." No greeting, no concern, just expectation. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, listening to the hum of the ship engines beneath me, steady and indifferent. The day had already decided what it wanted from me. By the time I stepped onto the breakfast deck, the sun was up, casting gold over polished tables and pastel dresses. My family was laughing again, as if yesterday had simply dissolved overnight. I stood to the side. No seat reserved. My mother caught my eye briefly and motioned to a stool pressed against the wall, near a service station. I nodded once, took the place they'd chosen. I wasn't seated with them. I was staged. It struck me then. Their silence had teeth. No fight, no raised voices, just a smooth freeze-out, wrapped in politeness. A stranger might say we were a peaceful family, but cruelty can wear pearls and keep perfect posture. Halfway through the meal, my father approached my table. He didn't sit. He spoke through a tight jaw. "You embarrassed your mother yesterday. The family expects an apology." I looked up slowly. "For what? For reminding you I exist?" He exhaled sharply. "Your tone, your disruption. This cruise is for your mother. You will not ruin it." Fallon appeared beside him, arms folded. "This isn't about you, Tinsley. Try not to make everything dramatic. Just apologize and move on." I rested my hands in my lap, calm. "You can't guilt me with shame I don't carry anymore." That ended the conversation. They didn't argue, they dismissed, walking away like a problem they'd already solved. I found air below deck, leaned against a steel wall. Let the cold anchor me. I knew this pattern: conflict, demand, apology, peace. Except this time, the cycle stopped. They want the old me, the one who said sorry just to be let back in. I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo. I'm done apologizing for breathing their air. I deleted every old draft message that began with, I'm sorry if. It felt like pulling anchors out of my chest. Coming up for air, I crossed paths with the captain. He paused, studied my face. Rough morning? I shook my head. No, first honest one I've had in years. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he let on. An hour later, someone slid an invitation under my door. Family photo shoot at 4 p.m. Location, main deck. At the bottom, in smaller print, attendance optional, extended guests included. Extended guest. I folded the card, circled the time, and placed it on my parents' breakfast table when no one was there. 2 words on the back: respect earned. That afternoon, I passed them in the lounge. They were reviewing the cruise slideshow, the highlight reel of their triumph. I didn't look at the screen, but I saw the frame reflected in the glass. I wasn't in a single image. I didn't flinch. You don't have to be in the picture to leave a mark on the frame. That evening, the deck was nearly empty. I stood at the railing, wind pressing against my back, phone in hand. I opened the confirmation message. I'd read it 10 times, maybe more. It was short, final, irreversible. They thought the worst thing I could do was speak. They were about to learn what I could do in silence. They gathered again for another photo op, all polish and posture, sunlight glinting on silverware and sequined dresses. I stood behind the glass railing, watching them lift their glasses in a toast I was never meant to join. They didn't say my name, they didn't look my way. From a distance, I could have been a stranger passing by. The photographer called out directions. Closer, arms around each other, and they obeyed, forming a portrait of unity that didn't include me. My stomach tightened, not with grief this time, but with resolve. They built this world together, then barred the door behind them. I remembered old pictures, vacations, birthdays, holidays, where I had been present, only to be cropped out later. Invisibility had become tradition. I whispered to myself, barely audible, if absence is all they'll allow me, then absence is what I'll use. The slideshow began again inside. Family Cruise, 40 Years Together, the title card read. On the screen, childhood memories I recognized had been subtly rewritten. One photo was missing entirely, the one where I stood between my parents, age 6, holding my father's hand. Now it was just him and Dalen. A niece tugged at her mother's sleeve and asked, "Who paid for all this?" Fallon answered without hesitation, "Your uncle, sweetheart. He's always taken care of us." No one corrected her, not even my mother. I rose from my seat and walked toward the front of the room. No one stopped me, but every head followed. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. At the base of the screen, I placed a folded napkin, shaped like a leaf. The same fold I made when I was 10, the same one she taught me. My mother saw it. Her smile faltered. Then I walked out. In the lounge, I moved to the bar line. The bartender hesitated, unsure. Thurlow, one of Forrest's friends, smirked to the others. "We don't serve non-guests here." Laughter rippled. I met his eyes. "Funny," I said. "I thought sponsors drank free," he blinked. The bartender looked to the captain. The captain gave a single nod. My glass was poured. Silence followed. Forrest approached, jaw tight. "You're trying to make a scene." I took my drink, unshaken. "I didn't come to be seen," I said softly. "I came to be heard." That silence, their sudden uncertainty, was louder than any accusation. Power shifted, just slightly. Enough to be felt. Then I reached into my pocket, not for revenge, but for truth. I opened my phone and held the screen toward Fallon. A message, forwarded by someone they trusted too much. Words from Dalen, sent weeks before the cruise. "Just get rid of Tinsley quietly. She's too much trouble." Fallon's face drained. She reached for the phone. I stepped back. Guests murmured. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" My mother stood frozen, fingers pressed lightly to her pearls. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just let the silence do what words could not. My calm became a mirror, and they finally saw their reflection. I left the room before anyone could recover. Out on the deck, the wind hit hard enough to shove tears from weaker eyes. I leaned into it, hair whipping wildly. No one followed. I let my voice carry across the waves, just loud enough for the lingering crowd inside to hear through the open doors. "Tomorrow," I said, "I'll let everyone know who really paid for this cruise." A pause. "And I won't need to raise my voice to do it." They thought my absence was their victory. They were wrong. Absence is where I sharpened my edge. I stood at the bow, salt air burning through my lungs, wind tightening every tendon in my body. From where I stood, the family below looked like ants moving in rehearsed patterns, plastic smiles, hollow toasts, all pretending this was still their show. But the crew noticed me. Quiet nods. A subtle glance from the deckhand. One even whispered to another as I passed, "She's about to make waves." He wasn't wrong. I slipped the folded napkin, leaf-shaped, into my pocket again. My signature. A reminder. I wasn't here to be pitied anymore. I was here to be remembered. I turned from the railing and walked back across the main deck, ignoring the stares. The captain was expecting me. I'd made sure of that. The door to his office opened before I knocked. He was calm, neutral. He gestured to the paperwork on his desk. The contract, the deposit, the itinerary, all under one name, mine. Behind me, I heard the shuffle of expensive shoes and the hush of collective disbelief. Forrest's voice hit first. "What the hell is this?" The captain didn't flinch. "This charter was booked under Ms. Langley's name. She holds the financial and legal responsibility for this voyage." Dalen blurted, "That must be a mistake." I stepped closer to the desk, my fingers grazing the edge of the folder. "It's not a mistake," I said. "It's called ownership." The silence that followed was thick and humiliating. For them. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just turned and walked past them all, contract in hand. The deck didn't feel like a stage anymore. It felt like mine. No more pretending. I found the bartender as the orchestra tuned their instruments again, guests returning from lunch. "Stop the music," I said. "No more wine. Pause the party." His eyebrows lifted. "Ma'am?" I showed him the captain's stamped confirmation, then opened my phone to reveal the vendor emails, every one of them copied on the cancellation I'd sent that morning. The orchestra leader looked toward the bar. The violinist froze mid-note. Champagne halted mid-pour. "Suspended," I repeated, "until further notice." Guests whispered. Forrest hissed behind me. "You don't get to control this." "I already did." He stepped closer, breath sharp. "You think this makes you powerful?" I looked straight at him, my voice low enough that only he heard. "You may own the story you tell about this trip, but I own what actually happened." I walked away before he could speak. Their faces, their shock, was the clearest truth I'd seen in years. Not anger, not outrage, but realization. They no longer had the reins. My mother's hands gripped the edge of her chair. Her expression didn't change, but her silence screamed louder than Dalen ever could. Speaking of Dalen, she finally snapped. "You're a disgrace," she shouted across the deck. "You dishonor your parents. You're ruining their anniversary." I didn't blink. "If my existence ruins your script, you've been lying to the audience." The captain stepped in. "The event is suspended until clarity is restored." All further services paused at Ms. Langley's instruction. She stormed off. But she didn't deny the truth. That was the win. I returned to the stern as the sun dipped a little lower. The sea was rougher now, waves slapping against the hull like a warning. I looked out across the water, then back at the clusters of confused guests and red-faced relatives. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Finally. "No more compromises," I whispered. "No more hiding behind their comfort." I clutched the contract folder to my chest. Not like a trophy, like armor. They'll sleep tonight thinking the damage is done. They have no idea what tomorrow brings. They called me up to the private lounge like it was some sort of summit. Jolie was already seated, legs crossed, sipping from a glass she hadn't touched. Ellery stood beside her, arms behind his back, too stiff to be casual. Daylin leaned against the wall like a watchdog, waiting for me to flinch. Jolie didn't waste time. We'd like to give you a chance to make this right before tonight. I stood still, arms at my sides. Ellery chimed in. We're asking you to publicly apologize before the gala, or don't bother showing up, not just tonight, any night after this. I said nothing. Daylin smiled, smug, certain. You've turned this trip into a sideshow, Jolie continued. We can't have your drama overshadowing Mom's night. Legacy, Ellery added. You're risking what we've all built. You know how these things spiral? The press, donors, people talk. I glanced at them like I was watching reruns. You're scared of scandal? I asked quietly. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. I could hear the desperation in the stillness. I straightened. Image is your god. I've just refused to worship it. Gasps. Even Daylin blinked. You'll hurt Mom, she snapped. You always do. Why now? I looked her dead in the eye. She's already hurt. I didn't do the damage. I'm just done pretending it didn't happen. There was a beat of silence. Then Jolie shifted in her seat and looked away. They didn't press further. The threat had been made, the ultimatum given. I turned to leave. Outside the door, Merritt was waiting. He looked smaller somehow, his spine not as straight, his eyes not as sure. I tried calling you, he said. I saw. I've been trying all day. Now imagine how I felt the days I needed you and got silence. He rubbed the back of his neck. This whole thing's spinning. I didn't think it'd go this far. Far? I said. This is the first time I've stood still and let you all walk into your own mess. He stepped closer, his voice low. Don't make this harder. I'm not making it anything. I'm asking you to take a side, for once. He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. Later that afternoon, I asked the captain's aide to issue a formal pause on the gala. She looked at me, then at the document in my hand, the contract, my authority. She nodded and made the call. Within minutes, servers halted, guests whispered, Fallon's face drained of color. The music stopped before it ever started. Thurlow marched across the deck like a man who believed the louder he got, the more he mattered. You can't hijack this celebration. I raised my voice just enough to carry, I didn't hijack anything. I own it. He looked ready to explode, but he didn't. The captain appeared, confirming the suspension of the evening's events. Just like that, their perfect night was in limbo. Because of me. Back in my suite, I spread everything across the table. Contracts, bank transfers, screenshots of group texts I was cut out of. A voice memo of Daylin's comment about dealing with Tinsley quietly. I gathered them all into a digital file and typed one sentence in the subject line. Correction. The cruise was mine. I blind copied a short list of outlets. Then I hit send. I leaned back in my chair, not triumphant, not broken, just ready. If they want to drag this fight into the light, I whispered, I'll meet them with open hands. And if they burn the house down trying to stop me, let 'em. By tonight, they'll understand. This wasn't just about the yacht. This was about legacy. Mine. The first rays of sunlight spilled across the deck, washing everything in a warm amber. The yacht sat still at port, quiet and dignified, as if nothing had happened. I stood alone with my last cup of coffee, letting the steam rise into the morning chill. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't need to. My mind was clear, finally. Guests lingered in small clusters near the railings, murmuring low, their glances brushing past me without landing. They didn't know what to say, and I didn't need them to. I heard footsteps behind me, measured, familiar. The captain stood beside me, holding out a folded slip of paper and a white keycard. You've earned more than their respect, he said. You've earned independence. I took the paper. It felt heavier than it looked. I looked out over the harbor, heart steady. I'd boarded this ship unsure, tangled in guilt and old bruises. Now, I was stepping off as someone else, someone I built, not someone I was molded to be. The captain stayed quiet a moment longer. Then he added, Years ago, I watched a family just like yours tear itself apart in these same waters. One storm was all it took. He handed me a second envelope. Inside was a document bearing my name, notarized weeks ago. Legal ownership, activated automatically under a clause if conflict of interest arose. "This yacht?" he said. "It was always yours, quietly but fully. They just didn't know it." My breath caught, not from shock, but from the strange peace that followed. "They can't touch this cruise, not legally, not morally." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just anchors." I nodded, words lodged somewhere deeper than my throat. Later, I walked the yacht one final time. The rooms felt different, no longer like stages in someone else's script, but chapters I had written myself. The pool deck, the lounge, even the grand staircase, mine now, not to keep, but to close, on my terms. Some guests gave me a nod, quiet but respectful. Jolie pretended to be deep in conversation. Thurlow had already left. Near the piano room, Merritt stood by the doorway. For once, no phone in hand. "You did what none of us had the courage to," he said. He offered his hand, not quite proud, not quite apologetic. I took it, not for closure, for release. Dalen sat at the piano bench, not playing, just sitting, hands resting in her lap like they'd forgotten what to do. I stepped close. "I hope one day you find your own voice." She didn't speak, just nodded, eyes wet, chin trembling. I left her there. At the dock, a small press team had gathered. I hadn't summoned them, but I wasn't surprised they came. I gave a simple statement. This journey began as a gift. It ended as a rebirth. No flare, no fireworks, just a straight line to the truth. I turned to the captain and handed him a quiet tip. "You taught me how to anchor," I said. He grinned. "And how to sail." As I walked down the ramp, a journalist called out, "Any regrets?" I paused, let the question sit for a beat. Only that I waited this long to stand tall. A cab took me to a modest seaside inn. No chandeliers, no silverware too polished to touch, just fresh sheets and the smell of salt in the breeze. I opened my laptop, half distracted, and saw a new email. A nonprofit wanted to partner with me, run advocacy cruises, give space to voices that never made the guest list. I smiled. My mother's words came back like a tide. "You always had the heart of a navigator." They tried to exile me from the family. I became the captain of my future. And just like that, the sea opened, not to bury me, but to carry me home.